I've always loved the quiet of my nightly walks home. The small town of Ash Hollow shuts down after dusk, leaving only the hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. My route cuts through a winding path near the edge of town, past the iron gates of St. Agnes Cemetery. It's an old place, crumbling headstones, moss-eaten crosses, the kind of spot you'd expect to feel creepy but mostly just feels forgotten. That is, until about a month ago, when the whistling started. It was faint at first, a single, mournful note slicing through the still air. I stopped mid-step, my breath catching as I turned toward the cemetery. The sound wasn't like anything natural, no bird or wind could twist a tune that way. It lingered, high and hollow, then faded into the night. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination playing tricks after a long shift at the diner. But the next night, it came again. And the night after that. Always the same solitary whistle, always from the direction of those rusted gates. By the fourth night, I couldn't ignore it. My curiosity gnawed at me, sharper than the chill in the air. I stood at the edge of the path, staring into the cemetery's shadows. The streetlights barely reached past the gates, leaving the graves swallowed in darkness. The whistle sounded again, closer this time, beckoning. My boots crunched on gravel as I took a step forward, then another. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I had to know. The cemetery smelled of damp earth and decay, a scent that clung to the back of my throat as I slipped through the gates. My phone's flashlight trembled in my hand, casting jittery beams across tilted headstones. The whistle grew louder, more insistent, pulling me deeper into the maze of graves. My heart thudded against my ribs, but I couldn't turn back, not now. I passed a cracked angel statue, its wings chipped and gray, when the air shifted. It felt heavier, like a storm was pressing down, though the sky above was clear. The whistle stopped abruptly, and in its place came a figure. He stood maybe 20 yards ahead, near an overgrown oak tree. Tall and thin, he wore a long coat that fluttered despite the stillness. His face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but I could feel his gaze, like pinpricks on my skin. I froze, my breath fogging in the cold. Who are you?" I called, my voice shakier than I'd meant it to be. He didn't answer. Instead, he raised a hand to his lips and let out another whistle, sharp, piercing, unmistakable. It wasn't menacing, exactly, but it rattled me all the same. Then he turned and drifted toward the back of the cemetery, his boots silent on the grass. Against every shred of common sense, I followed. The path twisted past a row of weathered crypts, their iron doors rusted shut. He stopped at one, its stone face etched with the name Elias Marrow. The whistling man, I'd heard the stories growing up, whispers of a ghost tied to Ash Hollow's past. A man wronged, they said, though no one ever agreed on the details. I'd always thought it was just a tale to scare kids. Now, standing here, I wasn't so sure. He didn't move as I approached, just stood there, his coat swaying like a shadow caught in a breeze. Up close, I could see more. His hands were pale, almost translucent, and his hat cast a darkness that hid his eyes. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The air hummed, and then he spoke, not with words, but with images that flooded my mind. I saw Ash Hollow a century ago, dirt streets, gas lamps, a crowd gathered outside a brick courthouse. Elias Marrow stood among them, shackled, his face gaunt but defiant. A gavel slammed, and the vision shifted, Elias in a cell, then dangling from a noose, his body swaying as a whistle escaped his lips. He'd been framed, accused of theft by men in power who buried their own crimes. The town hanged him to silence him, but his whistle never stopped. The images faded, and I stumbled back, my hands trembling. "You're him," I said. "Elias." He nodded once, slow and deliberate. Then he pointed beyond the cemetery, toward the glowing lights of Town Hall. Another whistle cut the air, this time layered with anger, urgency. I didn't understand, not yet, but I felt it. He wasn't here to haunt me. He wanted something exposed. The next day, I dug into Ash Hollow's history at the library. Old newspapers confirmed parts of what I'd seen. Elias Marrow, executed in 1893 for a crime he swore he didn't commit. But there was more. Rumors of a cover-up, a land deal gone dirty, powerful families pulling strings. And then I saw it, a name that jumped off the page, Hargrove. The same family that still ran half the town, including the mayor's office. That night, I didn't wait for the whistle. I marched back to St. Agnes, my flashlight swinging as I called out, "Elias, I know what they did to you." He was there, waiting by his crypt, his form sharper now, less ghostly. "It's happening again, isn't it?" I said. "The Hargroves, they're stealing from the town, just like before." He didn't nod this time. Instead, he whistled, a long, low note that vibrated through me, and pointed again toward Town Hall. I'd heard whispers at the diner, shady contracts, missing funds, families pushed off their land. It mirrored Elias's story too closely to be coincidence. He wasn't just a restless spirit, he was a warning. I spent the next week piecing it together, documents from public records, late-night talks with a friend who worked at the clerk's office. The Hargroves were siphoning money through a fake development project, displacing people for profit. I leaked it all to a local reporter, anonymous but detailed. The story broke fast, headlines screamed corruption scandal rocks Ash Hollow. Arrests followed, and the town buzzed with outrage. The whistling stopped after that. I walked past St. Agnes last night, half expecting to hear it, but the air was still. I stopped by Elias's crypt anyway, resting a hand on the cold stone. "You can rest now," I whispered. A faint breeze brushed my cheek, carrying the softest echo of a whistle, one last note, peaceful this time. Then silence.